Please welcome with me Huda Ahmed.
Good morning. How are you guys? No, I really mean it. How are you? I want one person, I'll talk about how I am, and then I want one person to share how they're doing today, because we don't do that enough. And my title, or my topic today, is the balancing act of Black women, our strength and also our well-being. And sometimes our well-being starts with, how are you? How am I? Me stopping to think about how am I? How am I really doing? So I'll start. I'm doing okay today. I say okay because it's a beautiful weekend outside. It's great weather. But I have a lot to do on my to-do list. I have stuff to do with my kids. None of them are fun. They have a bunch of school projects that are due. Things kind of just gear up and, I don't know, just get really high and intense right before spring break. And then everybody collapses. I'm going to make a off-color joke here. Coronavirus has made everybody cancel their plans. Everybody's staying home, and I'm like, yay, relaxation time. We don't have to go anywhere. So that's my mentality. So that's where I'm at. So I'm a little bit anxious, but I'm also excited to be here today. I'm grateful to share this space with you guys because I know that what I share today is going to resonate with a lot of you. I know I'm not alone. So I need one person. How are you? What are you grateful for? What are you thinking about? What are you hoping for? One person in the audience. Who's brave enough? Otherwise, I'm just going to start calling people. Anybody? You in the white. Whoever. Yeah, you? Awesome. That's great. I love it. Validated. That's such a powerful feeling to feel validated. And I think if there's one thing that comes out of this conference today, Sarun, and I think you've laid it out well, Fortune, is that if we feel validated and also have a sense of hope, I call it radical hope, that things will be different, things will change, things are going to get better because we're going to make it better, right? So with that, just a little bit of background about me. I am a mother. I have 3 beautiful kids, 12, 9, and 4. So we're, preschool age, dealing with preschool issues. If you guys have young kids, you know that. We're also dealing with tweens. K-pop is ruining my weekends and my quiet time. But I consider myself a community activist. What I call an inside organizer, and also a transformational change strategist. So transformation is my word as well. Thank you to this young sister over here. And I do all of those things in service to one mission, which is helping create a more just, healthy, and equitable society. So over the past 15 years, I've worked in public health, academia, and more recently in the private sector as a consultant to mostly philanthropic clients and public sector folks. And in all those settings, I've done the same thing. I think transformation takes one thing. If that thing does not exist, I don't think transformation can happen. And that's co-creation of upstream solutions with communities that are disproportionately poorer, sicker, and more unsafe. So co-creation with them, but also with the recognition that they are in those conditions, they are sicker and poorer and unsafe due to structural racism. Like, you have to own that up front. Structural racism that, yes, has historical roots, but continues to be perpetuated today in our laws, in our social policies, in our economic policies, and our political policies. So I have that conversation up front when I'm taking on a client. So we're going to do this. If we're going to do this, we're going to co-create. And we're going to start with recognizing that transformation must happen because racism is embedded. even if you don't recognize it. Even there's racism even without the racist. So we can just start right there. So that's what I've been doing the past 15 years. And I'm here today to talk about the strength and well-being of the Black woman. I am a Black woman. I think I'm strong. We're strong, right? We are? We're strong. I think one of the speakers here today was talking about how they come from a long line of strong women. I think that's one thing, one legacy many of us as Black women have. We come from a long line of strong women. We do. Our grandmothers, our mothers, our aunts, and we're also raising, I have 2 daughters, strong women. But there are things, there's, and I'll talk about this today, there are things that we need to change so that our daughters can not only survive, but thrive, because we're really good at surviving. But we need to push them up into survival, into thriving. And I'll touch on that today. So we're strong, but are we well? Are we well? No. Are we? No. What's well, right? We're surviving. For the longest time, I thought well meant surviving. Of course I'm well. I've survived. That's not it. We need to change that. So I'm going to do some level setting, quickly go through some data. A lot of it has been shared with you today by some of these great speakers and great women. But I would just want to level set so that we know that we're coming from. But I'm not going to speak too much into the data because that's not our whole story. So our health. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to experience a pregnancy-related death more than white women. Here in this country, I heard somebody talk about Africa, here in this country. And Black women have lower breast cancer diagnosis rate, yet when they are diagnosed, they tend to die more than white women. Our babies are 2.4 times more likely to die in the first year of birth. And that rate is only exceeded by Native women, by Native babies. And then generally, we just have a higher death rate from all types of diseases, more than whites. So for heart disease, for stroke, cancer, asthma, influenza, pneumonia, diabetes, you name it, we just tend to die sooner and more often than white women. So I want to go back to our babies are 2.4 times more likely to die in the first year of birth. They also tend to be born at a lesser weight. And that's my personal story. This is how I started this work. I was not born early, but my first daughter was. My first daughter, who is 12 now, was born 3 months early. She was supposed to be born November 17th of 2007, and she was born August 18th of 2007. I think it was a little over 26 weeks. I had just completed my master's. I was recently married, so education, right? Check. Stable home environment, check. But here I was, healthy, check. No underlying health conditions. Just all of a sudden, in labor, here she comes, get ready. And I had just graduated with a master's in public health, so I went into I gave the doctors at Abbott Northwestern and nurses a run for their money. I was a wonderful patient. No, I was just like, why? Explain to me why. Why? I'm healthy, I'm like all these things, why is this happening to me? Tell me a reason. And finally, the best doctor was like, you know what, Huda, it's not a science. What do you want us to do? And then doing my own research and learning that as a Black woman, as a second-generation Black woman, I was just more likely to have a low birth weight baby or have my baby die in the first year of life, no matter my education and no matter my socioeconomic status level. It didn't matter. So my daughter was born a little less than 2 pounds, rushed over to Children's. She had a team of doctors waiting for her, at least 7, I counted 7, waiting for her. And they said, they told me, be prepared, she may not live, she might have all these different, nervous system issues, she might not. So they rushed her over to the NICU at Children's Hospital, And after I got myself together, I was wheeled over to her incubator. And my mother was with me. My grandmother was with me. My mother-in-law was with me. And my aunt was with me. All of us. And it was dead quiet. And then I was like, okay, you guys have to say something. And they just looked at each other and said, we don't know what to say. And I said, what do you mean you don't know what to say? Between you have like 12 kids. Yeah, say something. And then I don't even remember who said it, but one of them said, well, we've never had preemies. And here I am. My parents immigrated to this country. I came at a young age. I think I was like 4. And here I am with higher risks than my parents, than my mother, than my grandmother. They didn't know what to say to me. So it's a personal story, but it's a story of many, 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 many Black mothers. And now my daughters, as third generation, just are much more likely. So our wealth, our median annual earnings for working full time, $36,735, give or take. Black women in the United States, and this I've heard a different figure, but I think different reports say different things, and this is more of national than Minnesota numbers. 61 cents for every dollar paid to white, non-Hispanic men. And then more than 6 in 10 Black women are in the workforce. So we're working at good rates, I think. But we're earning $36,000, where compared to the median wages of white and Hispanic men, which is about $60,000 annually. And we're just paid less for every dollar a white man is paid. And then so our home life, our health, our wealth, our home life. Studies show that Black families depend on Black women's earnings. I think Dr. Antonia mentioned that. We are responsible for the economic security. We hold the economic security of our families, yet we're paid so much more less. And then we also have substantial caregiving responsibilities. We're more likely to be taking care of elders, disabled family members, and child care. So about 3/4 of Black preschoolers are cared for by a relative. So they don't go to daycare, or they're cared for at home by a relative. And that relative is oftentimes a Black woman. So we're caregivers, our families are dependent on our earnings, but many of us don't have access to sick leave, or medical leave, or family leave. So that's our context. So let's sit with that for a second. How are y'all feeling? A little depressed? A little, right? And I don't like that. I don't like feeling, because I know we're strong. I know we're powerful. I know we're more than this data, right? So this is also us. The number of businesses owned by Black women increased by 178.1% between 2002 and 2012. That was fine. For the younger Generation Z folks, they're like, that was such a long time ago. But here's data. The number of women-owned businesses between 2007 and 2018 increased by 58%. However, the number of businesses owned by Black women during that time increased by 164%. Between 2004 and 2014, the number of Black women who have a bachelor's degree or higher increased by 23.9%, making them the group of women with the second largest improvement in attaining a higher ed degree. Black women also vote at high rates and are one of the most active voting blocs. That's also us. I want to give us a round of applause. There's the radical hope. We're dying, we're sicker, but hey, we are not drowning. We are keeping our heads afloat, and we're trying to raise our children above our heads so that at least they can survive. They'll be on land. They'll be walking. They won't be drowning. So that's us as well. We're sick, we're poor, we're holding our families up, but we're also starting businesses, we're getting educated, and we're flexing our political muscle. That's amazing. And I don't want to belittle that. That's our whole story. That's the whole picture. So, but are we well? Are we well? We are not. So even though we're doing these amazing things, we're sicker, we're dying sooner, and then who's stepping in? Who's stepping in to our places if something happens to us? Who are we raising to step in? Our daughters. Our daughters. And so we continue that cycle. And I'll get to that. And I'm so glad. I was like, this is going to be a little controversial. Somebody might get a little upset about it. But I think our sister here mentioned it. Somebody else here mentioned it. So who are we raising to step in? And so we're perpetuating that cycle. A lot of this is definitely on the policies, the outside, the external factors. But there's a part of this, I would argue, that's cultural to us as Black women and as Black communities. And until that changes, there's only so much that can happen. We're limiting ourselves. So the problem is multifaceted. It's, there's system stuff that the accomplices in the room can do, things that we can champion on the outside. And I'll talk about those first because I don't want to belittle them. I won't spend too much time on it, but I want to put it out there. So what we need increased earnings and pay equity. You heard a lot about that this morning, so that we can pay for childcare, so we hold economic security of our families, so that families can do better. And when families do better, communities do better. And when communities do better, we all do better. Right? We need more Black women in office. I want to second this young sister running. I will support you. I don't know where you live, but I'll support you. We need more Black women in office, helping shape the new policies and change the old ones, with our stories and with our lens. We need publicly funded universal preschool and early care. We also need, I worked in research for a while, that's how I met Fortune at the University of Minnesota. We also need increased funding for research, culturally appropriate health prevention, and I say culturally appropriate. It has to be culturally appropriate because some of the research that's coming out of those academic institutions are like a blanket. One size fits all. It does not fit all. Okay? And culturally appropriate treatment of Black women. But last and not least, because I've built my career on this, put our experiences at the forefront of social movements and policy change. Build on what we know. Don't come in to our communities trying to figure out what we know and then use it elsewhere. Build on what we know and what we've done, and the legacy and our legacy of strength and leadership. We can lead. We're not just foot soldiers, which I shouldn't use that term, but I can't think of a better word or better phrase. We can do strategy because we've kept our families alive and survive. And we also know what we need. So build on what we know. And that's what propelled me to take the co-creation that I've been doing for, in public health government, at the University of Minnesota, at nonprofits, and then eventually with a national consulting firm. That's why I took the leap. It's scary, but like we said, we come from a strong line of strong women. So we can do this. So it's going to take us taking risks and making the leap and believing in our own leadership before somebody else does. Somebody had talked about, I saw a quote somewhere where they said, if there's no room at the table for you, bring a folding chair. I say build a whole new table if you need to. Amen. Whole new table. And then the accomplices, the people that say we're all about equity, they can join our table. There's no better way to do it. It takes guts for us to build our own table. It takes guts for our accomplices to join us. But sometimes that's what it will take, because we are at a point, I think at least in my generation, that we are tired of waiting. We are tired of waiting to be invited. And our children are growing up in that. And we're saying, no, our children, our daughters are going to have better. At least I do. My son is going to have better. So that's the stuff you guys already know. This is going to be sister to sister, okay? There's the culture change that needs to happen. And the things that we can do internally in order to meet the opportunity that we're creating externally. And not perpetuate and propel the cycle that we grew up in, even if we're really good at surviving. We need to do this so that our daughters thrive, not just survive, so that they can meet the opportunities that we're trying to create for them. The first thing is stop perpetuating the strong black woman myth. Just stop it. We are strong, yes, but that's not all of it. We should be vulnerable. We were so wrapped up in it, and the outside tells us, and we tell each other, and we reinforce it. We're strong, yes. But then we also need to ask for help. We also need to be vulnerable. Because we're not well. We are not well. Whatever we tell ourselves, we are not well. The data shows that. So stop perpetuating the strong black woman myth. Stop and ask for help. And then self-care is not a luxury. It's a must. And what does self-care look like? I was at a conference once, and they're like, we're going to talk about self-care. And they had a very, the speaker was a very corporate person. And I just remember all the people of color in the room just looking at each other like, what? I mean, he talked about boundaries with family, and we're like, what? What is that? Boundary with family, we cannot. Who's going to, we're upholding our families. We can't be like, okay, I have a boundary now, okay? But there is things we can do. And it may seem weird. It might seem, like for me, I know myself. You all know yourselves better than anybody else does. For me, I know that I can go all day, and I'm also an introvert. By the time it reaches 7 o'clock, though, I need my children to be in their rooms. When they were younger, in their beds. Now it's like, please just take your whatever, take a book, take whatever, just please go to your room. Because that's when I shift from being like this wonderful, loving mother to being very tired. And that can come out in ways that I'm not happy about, and I'm sure my kids don't appreciate. But when I started telling people that, they're like, oh, somebody was like, I would have judged you for that. I'm like, judge away. It works. Because then between the hours of, it's not going to be 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. because kids, between 10 p.m. and 7 p.m. the next day, I can be there for them just because I got those couple of hours of just quietness. So draw boundaries. It doesn't mean cut people off. And our cultures, I know in our Somali culture, and I know sometimes even in the Latino culture, that's non-existent. I'm always reminded of the movie Spanglish, which is a long time ago, I remember, where the daughter was like, she told the mom, you're in my personal space. And the mom just got in her face and said, I'm your mother. There is no personal space between me and you. So while that may be true, I think we still need to have some boundaries. Some mothers don't need that time. But whatever you need, do it. Because you're not well. And you want your daughters to be well. And they're watching you. Ask for help. Eat healthy. Exercise. Meditate. Flip through a magazine. Do whatever it is that you need to do. You also, sister care, I talk about sister care. I'm really, really busy. I really am. I have 3 kids. If I'm not even doing something, I'm mentally busy. I'm going through my checklist, and I know many of you are. And we have families that we need to check in on outside of our, nucleus family, and that we need to support. But make the time to check in on your sisters. I get many messages in social media from young mothers that are like, Huda, how'd you do it? what are you doing? I remember one particular mother was really young mother, was really anxious about her child starting kindergarten next year, and she couldn't figure out how she was going to do pickup because school ended at 2 o'clock and the after-school programs were really expensive. And then as I started talking to her, I'm like, somebody here talk about negotiating for pay. You can also negotiate, if you have the luxury, your work hours. So I told her, I'm like, well, you know, what we did is my husband and I alternate. Like, he talked to his employer, so there are a couple of days that he can pick up the kids. And then I talked to my employer, there are a couple of days that I can pick up the kids. And then she's like, I didn't even think of that. And my husband has a flexible job. That's what I mean, stop and ask for help. Just because you can do it all doesn't mean you should. Right? And what you can do as a sister, as another Black woman, as a woman in general, is to support that. Make the time. Make the time. Dr. Antoni here talked about standing on each other's shoulders. That's what you do. And for the longest time, I told myself I was too busy to engage with these women, with these young women. I could not. I was barely surviving myself. But then I realized that it was detrimental to my mission and my purpose, that the next generation does it better and that they learn from my mistakes, but also the things that worked for me. So that's sister care. And then the community of care. This sister talked about, in our culture, I know in my culture, and I think it exists for many Black cultures, where sons are coddled. And there's a book out there that says, Black women love their sons and raise their daughters. I think it's very, very true, at least in my community it is. And then I saw something from a sheikh the other day, which is great. So I'm going to repeat this, and I'm paraphrasing here, where he said, invest and raise your daughters. Invest in and raise your daughters to be independent, so that when they get married, they have a partner, not a master. And he also said, also teach your sons to do housework, so that when they get married, they have a partner and not a housemate. And it's on us to do that. I mean, I think for our mothers, at least my generation, our mothers, it's kind of a done deal right now. Right now, it's like refereeing between them and our daughters. Like, no, don't say that. But, as mothers that are raising daughters and sons, it's going to take us doing things differently, teaching our daughters to thrive, right? Not just to survive and not to step in for us. And teaching our sons to thrive as well by being able to be a partner, but also take care of themselves. That's going to be critical, and that's going to take a lot of culture change on our parts as much as possible. And then so I leave you with a quote. This conversation is deep. And I'm sure there's a lot we could say, but I leave you with this quote. I think this is a powerful quote where Audre Lorde says, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. It is critical, today more than ever, it is critical that we be strong and that we thrive and we take care of ourselves to meet the challenges and opportunities of our time, so that our daughters can do better and our children as a whole can do better. Thank you. Questions? I don't know if I'm out of time. Was anybody hanging? No? Oh, great. Questions?
Huda, it takes women about 7 times to be asked before they will run for office. I don't know how many times you've been asked, but I'm asking.
5.
When will you run for office?
Soon.
I'm not there yet. I'm a lot closer than I was, but I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet.
You let me know if I can do it.
Perfect. I will. Thank you. I do. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Hi.
I think one thing for Black women, but I think for women of color So how would you balance that idea that you need to be working hard, so you need to keep being strong, and you need to keep going and achieving this and achieving that to be able to just like be average, right?
Right.
How would you balance that with self-care and like
Right.
not say yes to everything and not do
Right.
not take up all the opportunities, I guess, that
Right.
are
Yeah. So I'm not saying we don't need to work twice as hard. We still do, because the way the world is right now, we still do. But I think with many of us in this room, we are privileged. I mean, did you say you're a researcher at the? So when I was at the U, I learned that academics of color get so many opportunities thrown at them. And I think that's professionals of color everywhere. But a lot of it is visual. Go to this conference, show up at this, speak at this. But you know what they get, I don't know, it's not graded, what they get assessed on in the academic institution itself, tenureship. And if they're busy out doing, presentations or traveling to fancy places, are they able to meet that? It makes it hard. So what I would say is figure out a purpose for yourself. Figure out goals of what you want to try to achieve. And work hard at the opportunities and activities that get you to that goal. And that goal doesn't need to be just professional. I say make it a lot more holistic than that. So professional, family, financial, have a set of goals. And then say yes to the opportunities that get you to those goals. And filter out the rest. Welcome. Back there.
Add to that question, as far as we do have to work harder, like you said. But one thing I have learned along my journey is how to work harder.
Yep.
In the sense of, like, you definitely address if you're faculty. You want tenure, you need to have the space to do your research. But if you're staff or, in any organization, you have to figure out what do people need behind their name or behind their experience to get that promotion? And I have found through my time that when the top leaders tap someone to be their predecessor, they build their profile for them. Right. They make sure they're heading committees. Right. They make sure that they're getting professional development off campus. They make sure, just for example, where I work, a young man that was just hired a year ago, a year later, he was appointed to be a supervisor to someone. So having that supervisory experience also is what leads you to those stepping stones. Right. So when working harder, I used to think that if I showed and demonstrated my commitment and my hard work, that would get recognized.
Nope.
Hell no.
No, it does not.
You need to figure out in your organization, and they're not going to come out unless, the chosen few and tell you, these are the breadcrumbs I'm going to help you build your career. Yep. You have to watch how others have had their career built and how they're building others' career, your peer. And that's what you go for. And if you can't get those breadcrumbs in that position, you find another position that will give you those breadcrumbs. Because I tell you, 10, 20 years later, you will find yourself working harder, stressed, cancer, and still wondering why. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing to add to that, but amen. Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't get caught up in the busy work, even if it looks flashy. Anybody else? Over here?
I'm also going to add to that question in the sense that I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, so when I think of trying to implement self-care to work harder and go farther, I think that's the purpose, to make sure that you're intentionally figuring out how to take care of yourself on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, so that you can be able to work harder and go farther in the way that we have to do as Black women. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else?
say something down
Yeah.
here? One thing that I have experienced and have seen happen as women rise to power, that horizontal aggression. And I think that's sort of a white elephant in groups a lot of the time. We all say we want women to achieve, we want women leaders, we want women at the top of the corporations and business and all of those sort of things. But there's also a lot of the jealousy and the I worked really hard. How come all of a sudden you jumped ahead of me in this sort of thing?
Right.
Or somebody that has been a woman that's been in a certain arena for a while and has done really great things, of course. But then maybe somebody younger, maybe somebody more attractive, maybe somebody with a whole different set of skills arrives, and the person that's been there and has been working so hard is now threatened by this newcomer. And too often, rather than opening their arms and welcoming them and finding ways to use both of their experience and their skills, there becomes this sort of microaggression against or within a group. And I think, well, I would love to see that just go away.
Right.
And that when somebody steps up, somebody that has the same goals and values that you have, but are coming in at it at a new way, in a different way, that we embrace that rather than try to minimize or dismantle that person, because we're only fighting against each other. And it's really that unification and using everybody's skills, everybody's lens, that we're able to lift everybody up and not always think that I need to get to the top before that person, but let's get to the top together.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I've seen that happen again and again. And as Fortune said, I don't like conflict. And my work is conflict in nature, but I don't mind if the conflict is like trying to get to a certain outcome, but interpersonal conflict I have a big problem with. And I failed more times than I like in terms of how I handle it. And for me, it's getting pulled in. That's the part. If you know any different, please let me know, because I'm still working on this. What I've reached now is don't get pulled in. Don't get pulled in. Stay on your mission and your vision. But also, sometimes it maybe starts with listening to this other person. Because sometimes I can sense it, like it's coming, and I'm like, well, I'm not dealing with that person. I'm not talking to them. I'm like marching over here. But that makes it only worse. It just makes it worse. So I'm trying to teach myself to at least first stop and listen to see what their concerns are, validate them as much as you can, and that works for some people, and it does not work with others. They just want you to just get behind them. And if that's what you see, then move on as much as you can, and don't get caught up, and don't let that, I call it ugly, get in you, because it hinders you. Here?
Just a second. Can you, I think there's one thing that I would like you to talk about is the idea that Black and brown women can have coaches, personal development.
Oh, yes. Okay, so I told you guys that I thought I was thriving, right? And, but it turned out that I was just surviving really well, so that it looked like I was thriving. And then Fortune encouraged me to get a coach. And the coach she recommended was a white man on the East Coast that used to run a bank. And I'm like, yeah, no. And she said, just have a 30-minute conversation with him. And it was the best conversation of my life. And I'm working with him in my second year. Because if one thing that white men do know how to do is how to thrive, right? Abundance. Like they know they can get whatever they want. And they can teach you that. They can, and that's what I learned just in my conversations with him. I didn't even realize that I was just surviving until I talked to him. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm doing great. And he's like, yeah, you've been operating at like 60%, just a little bit better than everybody else. And that just hit me in the gut. I'm like, what are you talking about? So get a coach. It doesn't matter what kind of coach. You have to, it has to be somebody that you can connect with, that at least can listen, no matter what their background is, but that challenges you and holds you accountable. We've had some of the hardest conversations. I almost hung up on him a couple times. Like the toughest conversations that your family is not willing to tell you, or they don't know how to tell you because they don't even see it. Get a coach, get a professional development coach as much as possible. And then for me, that professional development had to be somebody that can see that I'm not just my career, I have all these other things going on at the same time. So I cannot separate my professional from my home life, which is a privilege that some people might have, but I do not as a Black woman. They're together. Yeah. Over here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fortune, for putting this together, and you have been doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kudos.
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to second what Representative Mary had said, that we need to collaborate and not compete. Of course, there is going to be a younger generation that are educated, that are eloquent, that are out there on
Right.
top of things, that
Right.
are ready to take over.
Right.
So let's not get jealous. Let's say, okay, what can she do better? She's beautiful, she's young, she's eloquent, she can attract legislators, whatever she's doing. Okay, well, let me join forces with her instead of saying,
Right.
why? Where did she come from? Who is she? When did she come into the arena? No, let's not compete. Let's collaborate. That's my last word. Thank you
I
very
agree.
much.
That's the best word, collaborate. I think we're out of time, so thank you. And thanks for having me, Fortuna.